It's Easter Sunday, 1478. The Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore in Florence is packed. The air smells of incense and unwashed wool. Thousands of heads are bowed in prayer. But in the front row, two men aren't praying, they are trembling. They are Lorenzo and Giuliano de' Medici, the two most powerful brothers in Italy. Suddenly, the priest raises the host, and the church bells ring. That was the signal. Daggers are drawn from beneath cloaks. In seconds, the holy silence is shattered by screams. Giuliano is stabbed 19 times right there on the cathedral floor. Lorenzo, bleeding from the neck, barely manages to barricade himself in the sacristy. Now, you might be wondering, why am I starting a story about banking with a murder in a church? Because we have been lied to. We are taught that banking is about math, that it is about interest rates, spreadsheets, and decimal points. But looking at the blood staining the marble floor of that cathedral tells you the real truth. Banking isn't about money. It has never been about money. It is about power. The power to decide who eats and who starves, who builds empires and who is erased from history. Today, we are going to trace the invisible red line that connects that bloody Sunday in Florence to the debit card in your pocket right now. We are going to walk through the 5 families that didn't just play the game, they wrote the rules. And I promise you, by the end of this, you will never look at a bank branch the same way again. It starts with the Medici. Before them, banking was a clumsy, dirty business. Actually, it was a sin. Catholic Church called it usual. If you did it, you will go simple as that. But the Medici were clever. They realized that if you can't change the rules of God, you just change the definition of the word. They stopped calling it interest. They called it commission. They invented the letter of credit. Imagine this. It's the 1400s. The roads are filled with bandits. If you carry gold from Florence to London, you are going to get robbed and probably killed. So, the Medici said, "Give us your gold here in Florence. We will give you a piece of paper. You take that paper to our cousin in London, and he will give you the gold back." It sounds boring, right? It sounds like a wire transfer. But this was the moment money stopped being a physical object and started being an idea. Suddenly, trade exploded. The Medici became richer than kings. They bought the silence of the church. They actually bought the papacy itself. 2 Medici sons became popes. Think about that. They owned the bank, and they owned the guy who held the keys to heaven. That is the first lesson of the dynasties. Don't just control the money, control the moral authority. But dynasties fall. The Medici got lazy. They started lending to kings who never paid them back. And eventually, the center of gravity shifted. Fast forward to a rainy, muddy field in Belgium. June 18th, 1815, the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon is fighting the British. The fate of Europe hangs in the balance. But back in London, the stock exchange is quiet. Everyone is waiting. If Napoleon wins, British bonds will crash. If the British win, the bonds will soar. Enter Nathan Rothschild. The Rothschilds were different from the Medici. The Medici were focused on one city. The Rothschilds were the first true multinational corporation. Saint-Effibrot sells London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, Naples. They had their own communication network. Faster horses, better boats. They say the Rothschild couriers could cross the English Channel in a storm that would ground the Royal Navy back to the stock market. Non Rothschild Grim. He starts selling. Everyone watches him. Rothschild is selling. They whisper. That means Napoleon has won. The war is lost. Panic. Absolute panic. Everyone starts dumping their British bonds. Prices crash through the floor. The market is destroyed. But Nathan, what the history books argue about and what the archives suggest is that while Nathan was publicly selling to cause a panic, his agents were secretly buying up everything for pennies on the dollar. Why? Because Nathan's private courier had already arrived. He knew, before the King of England knew, that Napoleon had lost. When the official news finally arrived a day later, British bonds skyrocketed. Nathan Rothschild had multiplied his fortune 20 times over in a single afternoon. He famously said, "By when there is blood in the streets, even if the blood is your own." This is the second lesson. Information is more valuable than gold. And if you can control the speed of information, you can manufacture reality. But the 19th century gave way to the industrial age, and the game changed again. It wasn't about gold or bonds anymore. It was about steel, railroads, and oil. Enter the giant. John Pierpont Morgan, J.P. Morgan, look at a photo of him. He had a nose disfigured by rosacea and eyes that looked like they could burn a hole through a vault door. He was terrifying. Morgan didn't just want to make money. He wanted to organize the world. He hated competition. He called it wasteful. He bought up rival steel companies and merged them into U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation. He merged railroads. He merged electric companies into General Electric. But his true power was revealed in 1907. The New York Stock Exchange crashed. Banks were collapsing like dominoes. There was no Federal Reserve back then, no government safety net. If the banks failed, America failed. So, what did Morgan do? He didn't call the president. The president called him. Morgan invited the top bankers in New York to his private library on 36th Street. He smoked his cigar, listened to their panic, and then he walked to the heavy oak doors, and he locked them. He put the key in his pocket. He told them, "No one leaves this room until you agree to pool your money and bail out the system." They were trapped. They argued. They sweated. But by 4 a.m., they signed. Morgan unlocked the door. The panic was over. One man saved the American economy. But this scared the living daylights out of the government. They realized that one private citizen had more power than the United States Congress. They said, "We can never let this happen again. We need a system." And that brings us to the most controversial moment in financial history. The moment the system was truly born. It's a cold night in November 1910. A private train car with the blinds pulled down leaves Hoboken, New Jersey. Inside are 6 men. They are told to use only their first names. If the press finds out they are together, it will be a scandal. Among them are representatives of the Rockefellers, the Morgans, and a brilliant German banker named Paul Warburg. They travel to a private club on Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. For Nindai, they had a face at night. They are drafting a document. Paul Warburg, the architect, explains to them how European central banks work. He tells them They need a central bank in America to control the money supply. But they knew the American public hated the idea of a central bank. It sounded like tyranny. So they used the Medici trick again. They changed the name. They didn't call it a central bank. They called it the Federal Reserve. It sounds governmental, doesn't it? It sounds like a federal agency. But it isn't. The Federal Reserve is arguably neither truly federal nor does it have any reserves. It is a system designed by bankers, for bankers, to stabilize the game that Morgan had to save by himself. When they returned from Jekyll Island, they handed the bill to politicians. It was past 2 days before Christmas in 1913, when most of Congress was at home with their families. This was the victory of the Warburgs and the Rockefellers. They solidified the system. Now, money wasn't just gold, and it wasn't just trust. Money was a faucet, and they had their hands on the valve. So, we have the Medici who invented the credit, the Rothschilds who mastered information, the Morgans who consolidated industry, and the Warburgs and Rockefellers who built the Federal Reserve. But where are they now? You don't hear about the Warburgs on the news. The Rockefellers are busy with charities. Did they disappear? No, they did something smarter. They went institutional. They realized that having a famous last name is dangerous. It puts a target on your back. So they stopped being families and started being firms. They started being funds. Today, the power doesn't sit in a library on 36th Street. It sits in the algorithms of BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. These massive asset managers own a piece of almost every company in the S&P 500, but here is the twist. This is the part that should keep you up at night. We are currently living through a shift just as big as the invention of the letter of credit or the founding of the Federal Reserve. The old dynasties built a system based on debt. You borrow money, you pay interest. That is how the world has turned for 500 years, but that system is reaching its limit. Global debt is so high it can never be paid back. So, what happens next? I dug into the white papers released by modern central banks. They aren't talking about bailouts anymore. They are talking about a reset. They are moving towards central bank. Digital currencies, CBDCs. Imagine a world where money isn't just a number in a bank account. It is programmable code. The Medici could decide who to lend to. But with programmable money, the issuer can decide what you are allowed to spend on. If the old dynasties wanted power, they had to hire armies or by politicians. In the new system, the power is built into the currency itself. If you save too much, they could program the money to expire. If you buy the wrong things, they could toggle your access. It is the ultimate dream of the Medici, the Rothschild, and the Morgan combined. Total efficiency, total control, zero risk for them. So, what do you do? The history of these 5 dynasties teaches us one thing. The rules are always changing, and they are never changed for your benefit. When the Medici changed the rules, the prepared merchants got rich. When Rothschild changed the rules, those with information survived. We are entering a new era. The bank is disappearing. The branch is disappearing. The physical dollar is disappearing. The only way to protect yourself is to do what they have always done, diversify. Do not rely on a single system. Own things that are real. Land, gold, skills, community. The dynasties built the modern world, yes. But they didn't build it for you. They built it for themselves. And now that you can see the invisible red line connecting the cathedral floor to your digital wallet, the question is, are you going to be just another person kneeling in the pews, hoping for the best? Or are you going to be the one reading the signals before the bells start ringing? Because the bells, they are already ringing.